today, Ian MacLeod and Joanne Waters, to discuss what IMC is doing and how they are virtualizing the clinical trial supply chain with HITLAB's own Greg Bauer. Greg, handing the virtual podium over to you.
Thank you, Stan, very much. It's great to be able to join the group here. Yeah, we all know about the importance of adherence in clinical trials in terms of driving the success of those trials, especially when it comes to securing a timely approval for specific titrations, doses and frequency of use. But how do we know when patients fall out of their prescribed protocols, and what can we do about this? As you mentioned, we've got Joanne and Ian. I'm going to pose this first question to Joanne. What can, beyond what I just mentioned, what are some of the reasons it's important for patients to take their medication properly?
Hi, Greg. Thanks very much for that. So can you hear me okay? I'm in a public situation here, so I want to make sure you can hear me.
Yep.
We're good? Okay.
Yep.
Nice to be on the panel. Thanks very much for that. It's interesting you talk about, the theme of this panel today is the basics, right, of digital health. And when you talk about the biggest area of concern and the biggest cost to healthcare is what they call medication non-compliance or non-adherence, meaning did a patient take their medicine as they were supposed to? And we are human, and a lot of the data has shown over these 2 decades that we don't take medicine as we're supposed to. So we develop these solutions and tools to help patients. So, improving patient health outcomes is a major part of that. We have actionable insights that we can work with. The basics of understanding how medicine is taken is really the reason why we exist, and we help research teams with that, actually. Yeah.
So how do we go about measuring adherence, Joanne? What's the kind of a process, or what are some of the means by which we do that today?
Yeah, that's the important question, right? So reliably, we would normally go to the doctor, and the doctor would say, Joanne, how are you doing with your medicine? And I'll say, well, I'm doing pretty good. I'm taking it as I should be. But in fact, I'm really not. So we design and customize products that actually will record using sensors. So as an example, if you have a standard pharmacy pill bottle, when you open the bottle, we can record the date and time that bottle is opened. So that's really the foundation of getting the adherence data that we do need to then help patients who actually start to fall off. You think you're actually taking it as you should, and we can see that you're actually not doing that. So we have these smart pill bottles. We have smart blister packaging technology that's encompassed with all types of set up treatment parameters that help patients to know why they have to take their medicine as they should.
So that's great. So who are the people who are managing a trial that stand the most to gain from having that sort of real-time knowledge of the patient adherence? Who are the folks that are most concerned about that, or at least if they're not, why should they be?
Yeah, that's the question, and we feel it touches every point along the supply chain. If you were, as an example, a pharmaceutical sponsor and you're developing a new medicinal product, you really want to make sure that the drug is taken as it should be. You also want to protect the drug. So a lot of those clinical trials are blister format to protect the drug and make sure it's not, there's no degradation of the product itself. So the sponsor for sure has a major interest in that to help de-risk the clinical trial. And as per the FDA, they of course patient safety, right? So to ensure that the medicinal product is at the right dose, given to the right patient at the right time. And it's that type of data. So if you're into clinical supplies, each one of those types of devices has a unique identifier, which can actually be traceable throughout the entire supply chain. So from the moment the packaging happens, from the moment the pill is dispensed to a patient, then back to a patient at home, we can use what's called remote monitoring. So when patients take their medicine at home, we can also see that visibility extended to a patient's home. So it's pretty critical. So it really touches everyone from the sponsor from the clinical research organization who actually talks to patients, and as well to improve the patient health outcomes. So it touches from the end to end of a life cycle of a drug journey, really.
That's fascinating. And I think that also to not be short shrifted, so to speak, is the patient, him or herself, right? I mean, if we're doing a trial on a new pain medication and they fall off their regimen and they wind up saying, oh, geez, I didn't take it yesterday, so I double dosed today. There's a toxicity factor there too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
yeah.
big issue.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Absolutely. We see a lot of pain research. You know, anesthesiology and pain is a very, very expensive trial, one of the top ones for costs of running a pain trial. And we see the evidence that, and it's a bit scary as well, is because the patients really, you know, they start out as they're supposed to take the pain meds, you know, to help alleviate maybe post-surgery or something along those lines. And then it'll stop for a little while where they don't take any medicine, and then come again on a weekend, and all of a sudden we see they're taking more medicine, and this is weeks after possible surgeries, etc. So it really does bring awareness to research teams of how patients are taking them, and how can we prevent that sort of dosing behavior to help with better health outcomes for the patient and prevent possible addiction rather than dealing with the addiction cycle after it happens. So pain is a big area of concern.
Yeah, and so even actually, Joanne, beyond the pain, any condition that we're evaluating new standards of care associated with, Ian, you know, as the product manager, you get to see all the reporting and analytics that help the trial managers track the adherence. Can you speak to some of the tools that you've seen and how you've been able to implement those tools to improve is it with the CRO or who's it with that you're really working with to make sure that you're getting real-time adherence information, not a week or two later?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Greg. Thanks for having me on the panel. So real time is something that we strive for, and our medication tracking devices, our smart bottles, our smart packages, they record dose removals and they store it on device permanently. So that is on the device awaiting upload to our cloud where it can be analyzed and shown as you're describing. And so ways that we ensure that it is as real time as possible is with our scanning technology and our patient reminders system. So we have a way for patients to very easily tap their phones to their devices, retrieve that data, and upload it for analysis. And some of the things that our researchers see with this data is who has been at a level of site versus site, who has been more adherent or less adherent. That's something that has been difficult to do before now, but because of our ability to aggregate across sites, we can compare one site versus another site, looking for systemic problems with patient adherence one way or the other. I'll also say that patterns that strike a chord from our data, something that stands out right away, is a pattern that we've noticed and detected often called the deblistering pattern. And this is something that's very important for blistered medications. And it's something that happens when a patient removes all their doses all at once from a blister package, probably for the sake of convenience, transferring from a blister package to a Ziploc bag, something that's more convenient for them to take out of the house and move around with them. And we can flag this, we can notice it right away. And it is vitally important for clinicians and clinical trials to be aware of these behaviors. Without a smart package, there would be no way of knowing that this is occurring. And so that's another example of one of the things that we've been able to notice immediately as soon as the data comes in and be able to make actionable recommendations upon.
So that's an interesting point about the actionable activities and so on. And you talked about clinical sites or trial sites. Can you maybe speak a little bit more for the audience about what a clinical trial site is and how many there might be, especially if you're in a phase 2 or phase 3 trial?
Definitely, yes. So clinical trials take place across multiple different locations, often different cities, potentially even different countries. And so when we say site, that's what we're referring to, is a certain location, typically a doctor's office or a clinic, where the patients come in to enroll in the trial and they return there for follow-up visits. And So your point about, sorry, what was your original question about the site?
Yeah, I was just referencing for everybody's edification, what sort of defining our terms around what a clinical trial site is. And that, a contract research organization may have a number of sites, and that your reporting will then show comparative data on how the different sites are going. But having that real-time data helps them communicate with their patients, right? To make sure, hey, I see, Johnny, that you've fallen off.
Exactly.
Can you explain it? So that's where I was kind of going around.
Yeah.
Using the analytics to manage the adherence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
can I type in there?
by all means, go ahead, Joanne.
Sorry. Yeah, so how I see that actually, Greg, is this. So what's very interesting about the Certiscan platform is this, right? So you can have your sites across the globe, as Ian mentions, and across cities, right? So what our dashboard you can do is, say, site in Chicago is, the enrollment is going well and their adherence scores are, let's say, 65%. But then all of a sudden, New York's site, where the patients come and get their medicine and come to get their blood drawn and these sorts of activities, all of a sudden, New York, for some reason, their adherence scores are like 95. So we can show the sponsor and who's ever funding these trials to say, why is New York doing so much better at adherence than Chicago? And then at that point as well, it could be the CRO team maybe needs to be, retrained or something. They can look at and dig deep down into why enrollment is happening better and more quickly at one location versus the other, and see the adherence scores of why. And when you talk about what the FDA is saying about the diversity and reaching more for the trial populations, and the gentleman Sean before mentioned, the rural clinics, etc. The outreach using smart packaging and smart solutions is that much better now, because you can reach places where you didn't have to. So instead of a patient driving 3 hours to go to a site, they can use remote monitoring and our smart packaging to enter into a discussion with the CRA to say, hey, how are you doing, Johnny, with your medicine? You're doing really well, except what happened on the weekend. So it really empowers the patient, and it is good for engagement between the site or the physician and the patient. So site is really, the dashboards of understanding the site activity is really, really crucial.
What's interesting about that, Joanne, is, of course, that I think a third of the cost of managing and running a clinical trial is associated with patient recruitment, retention, adherence, and so on. And if patients fall off, typically many will after 3 to 6 months, the sponsor and the CRO have to go out and replace those people to get more participants. So that can become a very expensive proposition if you're not managing the timely adherence, and especially, as you just referenced, the underserved populations, the health equity or the inequity in certain groups that have a harder time inherently adhering because of where they are and what their circumstances are.
Yeah. And also a very critical, important point as well is why a patient may stop participating in the trial is because maybe they don't feel well. Maybe they're having a serious adverse event, and then typically they won't, they'll drop out, or they just may pretend that they're taking their medicine when they're really not. So it's this type of engagement that we can help and dig down into why isn't the patient taking their medicine. Oh, Johnny, you're having side effects. Okay, well, I understand. Thank you for telling me. So can I see, I'm going to tap my smart package and see that Johnny's been way off on his meds. So that is where, again, it's all about improving the patient health outcome and educating the patient as well.
It's interesting. I know we wanted to talk about patient engagement and empowerment, and also patient centricity. And I think that, Sean Smith just now did a really nice job, speaking to, meeting the patients where they are. And with your tools and with your capacity to kind of see what this is about, can you speak to how the trials can be enhanced with a greater sense of centricity, or at least a greater awareness about it. Maybe Ian, you want to take a stab at that?
Definitely, yeah. One of the really incredible things about smart packaging is that the clinical trials and the patients can sort of decide what level of engagement they want to deploy, starting from simple, which is still very empowering. And as they become more comfortable and experienced with smart packaging, it can move up to more sophisticated and more powerful levels of engagement. I'll talk about two hypothetical trials. Trial 1 uses smart packaging just for passive tracking and after the fact review, which is incredibly powerful. Showing patients a graph or a calendar of their adherence is quite eye-opening. It can motivate them to stay on track if they're doing well, or to try a little harder if their adherence isn't really what it needs to be. But one drawback to this is that it's after the fact. So it is patient-centric, but the patient is not getting as much as they could out of it compared to hypothetical trial number 2, where we're using real-time remote monitoring. We give patients an app that can connect to their smart packaging and make them more informed and active in their own care. I like to use the point of comparison of a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. Before such fitness tracking tools, it was theoretically possible for people to journal and record all of their health and fitness data, but it was impractical. Now, millions of people around the world are passively and easily tracking and improving their health and fitness, and the same can be true of medication adherence with these smart packaging app deployment solutions.
That's terrific, Ian. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Hey,
thank you all for
Stan?
joining us today.
Oh.
Just a tremendous segment, and a terrific work, Joanne and Ian. What you guys are doing is truly spectacular and heroic on so many levels, and the data that you're finding is brilliant. And Greg, thank you again for moderating an expert panel on this. Thank you all for joining us
Yep.
today.